Welcome to this complete masterclass on the 13 things you need to know before you buy your first or your next camera for YouTube. We're going to be breaking down in detail the features so you don't waste your money. And after watching this, you're going to be the smartest person in the room when it comes to cameras. And towards the end of the video, I'm going to break down the best cameras for every budget for YouTube right now going into 2023, and take advantage of time codes and chapters if you want to skip around. But the best camera for you is at the intersection of budget, features, size, and skill. And so there really isn't the perfect camera. There's just the perfect camera for you. So these are some things to decide ahead of time. What's your budget? Let me know in the comments. What features do you need? We're going to learn about 13 different features you should consider so you make sure you don't spend your money in the wrong way and buy a camera that is missing something you need. Then there's size. There's some of the most powerful features, but maybe the camera's too big to actually take with you or to carry around or to get into maybe places like theme parks or in different situations. So size matters. And then finally, skill. Are you a beginner? Are you more advanced? Do you want the camera to be easy to use? We're going to be covering all of those as we talk about how to choose a camera for video and YouTube, and 13 camera features that you need to know so you don't buy the wrong camera. And if you're grateful for videos like this, can you hit the like button and let me know where you are in the world watching this? If we're just meeting, my name is Sean Cannell, and my mission is to help people build their influence with YouTube. You know, cameras can be confusing, and all of this information I'm sharing with you really comes from my experience of working with cameras for over 2 decades, basically right now. Back in 2003, there's my wife sitting next to me in that striped shirt. We were playing with the different point and shoot cameras. I started shooting video in my local church, and eventually I started a wedding production business and a video production business. And I want to encourage you, start with what you have and then level up your gear as you go. And we're going to talk about how in this video. And question for you, are you planning on actually buying a new camera soon? And if so, which model are you looking at? Let me know in the comments. Let's dive into the 13 camera features you need to know so you don't buy the wrong camera. The first is sensor size. If you look at the camera here on screen, you can see that right there is the sensor of what is called a mirrorless camera. And if you've heard of a DSLR, that is a camera that has a mirror in it so that it reflects up to the viewfinder so you can see the image. Mirrorless cameras remove the mirror. In both cases, there's still a sensor inside of the camera, and that is what captures the image. This is going to influence your image quality. If you want that cool, blurry background, this is what influences depth of field. This influences low light performance. And typically bigger is better. The bigger the sensor, the better. But also the bigger the sensor gets, the more expansive the camera is, the more expensive. And so if you look on screen here, this is a full frame sensor pictured, not true to size maybe to your smartphone or computer that you're viewing on, but just compared to each other, what we're going to be looking at here is different sensor sizes. And to get an idea of this, most like wedding videographers, filmmakers in today's world typically want to have like a full frame camera. There's a lot of buzz around having that. But for most YouTube creators, it's unnecessary. And if you go to what's called an APS-C sensor camera, what people will call this, that's a crop sensor. This is like perfect for YouTube, is anything in kind of this range. Now, if you go to a 1-inch sensor, if you look at different cameras like the Sony RX series or the Sony ZV-1, they usually have a 1-inch sensor inside of there, even smaller, right, than an APS-C sensor. And then if you think about your smartphone, it has a tiny little sensor. Now, smartphones can do some pretty good video these days, but remember, this is one of 13 different things to consider, and that's going to be the sensor size. And so the sensor size, again, influences image quality, depth of field, and low light performance. And if you want to be a filmmaker and really have good low light, as you'll hear people say, you typically want a full frame sensor. For most of us as YouTube creators, APS-C is fine, meaning a crop sensor camera. Now, number 2 is video resolution. And you've heard, of course, you got a 4K TV. Do you got one of those? You've got a lot of gaming systems have 4K now or bigger, 6K, 8Ks around. So what kind of video resolution can my camera capture? And so if you look on screen, 4K, also known as 2160p, you've got HD 1080p, and then you've got smaller than that. Does anybody remember back when we watched DVDs? It's shocking how small of an image resolution wise a DVD is compared to today's 4K content that is just all over Hulu and Disney Plus and Netflix. Like everything is really 4K today. And so when it comes to cameras, for YouTube, HD is kind of the minimum you're going to want to go for. And some cameras that are a little bit older are limited to that. It's pretty standard that you're going to have some level of 4K. What can happen, though, is pictured on screen under the Ultra HD at the bottom there is the Canon M50. And one of the weaknesses of that particular camera was, yes, it shot 4K, but it had what was called a crop factor. So all of a sudden you had this nice wide image and things were looking beautiful. You switched it to 4K mode and all of a sudden it cropped in. And you're like, shoot, what happened to my nice wide image? So just because a camera is 4K, it doesn't mean that it's good, because there could be different weaknesses to that camera. So if you're picking out a camera, I would say 1080p is minimum, but 4K is definitely mainstream on TVs and even phone these days. And if you want to future-proof your content, I definitely recommend 4K. 4K does require a better computer to edit. So one of the things that I ask myself when I'm choosing a camera is, what's my entire workflow? I'm going to shoot my YouTube content. Then what am I going to do with it? I'm going to take the SD card out. Where am I going to put that? Okay, into a card reader or my laptop. How good is my laptop? And can it edit these video files that I'm going to throw at it? One thing to consider. And then what a lot of people do is they shoot in a larger resolution and then they crop in while editing. So one of the coolest things to do is that even if you're not going to actually use all of the 4K or technically end with a final file that is a 4K video, what you can do is essentially record in 4K. If you picture on screen, it's a picture of my wife, Sonia, and my son, Sean Bradley. If you imagine how big that image is, but then you look at full HD, which the text is over my white little dog Sophie's face, you can imagine that 4K is like 4 times bigger than HD. So I could crop into my wife's face or my son's face or the dog in video editing and essentially create multiple angles. You've got the wide angle, right? And then you could then crop in, crop out. So 4K is definitely a feature that I think is pretty essential in a 2023 world. And so a couple questions you should ask also when it comes to shooting 4K is there a record limit? What can happen when you're capturing a larger file? The bigger the resolution, the larger the file size, the more hard drive space you need, the harder it might be to edit. And some cameras only can record maybe 10 minutes or 20 minutes because the 4K file is larger. So again, you can run into downstream problems as you upgrade your technology. And there's plenty of cameras that don't have a record limit and are working great now. And remember, check out the time codes and chapters and you could skip to that part. But you're also asking, is there an image crop? Like the Canon M50, there's an image crop that, in a way, my opinion, it makes the 4K unusable. Does the camera overheat when shooting 4K? It's a big problem. Sony starts dropping 4K in a lot of their cameras. People are like, this is amazing. And then they're like, this camera's overheating. Canon drops it in the R5, R6. There's some overheating issues. Newer cameras now have fixed that. But when you're recording a larger image file, the camera is doing more processing. The file size is bigger. There's more data going through the sensor. The sensor is getting hotter and the camera is getting hotter, and it may go into an overheat mode, which is actually just making sure the camera doesn't melt. So internally it has a limit so that it just turns off. And so something to consider. Number 3 is lens aperture. And the question is, can you change lenses on the camera? So is my camera interchangeable lenses? Or if it's not, what is the lens aperture? How low does it go? Is it going to be low enough so that I can film in the dark? Is it going to be a low enough aperture so I can have the blurry background? what is the lens aperture. If you can do interchangeable lenses, you kind of have unlimited opportunities. And if you're getting value out of this video, can you hit the like button? So let's look at lens aperture. So first here, this is going to influence your low light performance, your depth of field to get that blurry background. And the lower number means better typically, but the lower number means also more money. So let's look at some examples. If you buy a Canon Rebel T7i, kind of more of a more budget DSLR mid-range camera, prosumer camera, and you get the kit lens, and the kit lens is the name of the lens that just is included with cameras. They're typically not great. They're usually okay or terrible. The lens that we see here, we can actually read on the lens in small numbers. It says 3.5 dash 5.6. What that's telling us is that as you zoom in, when it's wide out, the lowest the aperture can be is 3.5. And that is not very low. And if you zoom all the way in, it's going to force the lens to 5.6. Now you can control it and what it's called stop down. You can stop down the lens more if you want to control the lighting or get less depth of field so everything is more sharp. But for our cases as YouTube content creators, what we're looking for is, okay, how good of a lens aperture can I get? Because I want to get that blurry background look. I want the right look of my videos. So this Sony camera pictured here, the RX100 series, starts at 1.8. That's good. I like that. So I want that 1.8 life. This one over here on Canon G7X, this is also 1.8. So remember, we're going through 13 things that are like a checklist, and we're saying, okay, do I want to have that blurry background? Do I want this to be good in low light? These would be pretty good cameras in low light because they have 1-inch sensors. They've got 1.8 apertures. Whereas this is also going to influence price because there is a Sony camera called the DSC W800, little point and shoot camera. You could vlog with this camera, but it starts at 3.2 on the aperture. So when you look at that, you go, okay, well, that's part of the reason it's $288. The lens isn't as good. Whereas if you look at the highly recommended at Think Media here camera that we talk about all the time, the Sony ZV-1, that starts at 1.8. But notice the difference in prices of these two cameras. And so that's going to be a big piece that influences that. So a couple questions you have is, what is the starting aperture of your lens? Another question is, can you upgrade your lenses later? If we go back to these two cameras, you cannot. These two cameras have non-interchangeable lenses, but they are zoom lenses. So you can create different shots. You can zoom in, zoom out, get different looks to it, but you cannot completely change the lens. Whereas on a camera pictured here, you actually can change your lenses later. So even if you say, okay, I'm going to invest in a camera today, save up my money, and then as I make money from my YouTube channel or my side business, or I save up, I can upgrade my lenses later. You can invest in a camera body today and buy as many lenses as you want tomorrow. So can you upgrade your lenses later? And then aperture plus sensor is actually the combination that's going to most greatly influence your light performance. So if you've got a low aperture, I've got a lens from Canon that is a 1.2. This lens costs like over $1,000. Crazy. They call it shallow depth of field, right? And then you put that on a full frame camera. That's usually the combination that, again, a lot of filmmakers, wedding videographers, portrait photographers would want. Not something you really need for YouTube. There's a real happy medium. And that's why we're going to be talking about the best cameras that check all of the boxes from a YouTuber's perspective towards the end of the video. So can you invest in a good camera body now and upgrade your lenses later is a good question. Number 4, autofocus during video. So this is a big one. And some people would argue and say autofocus is not that big a deal. I can save some money. I'm going to buy a camera that either doesn't have very good autofocus or a camera that can just do manual focus. Now, right now I'm filming on an older Panasonic GH5. It does not have very good autofocus. I locked down the focus before I went live to record this video, and it's fine because I'm just sitting here. But if I would not buy this camera as an all-around YouTube camera. It's too heavy to vlog with. It doesn't have good autofocus. It's really not easy to use. And so I think that autofocus during video is an essential ingredient of a good camera for 99% of YouTube creators. One that has good face tracking, and not just face tracking, but these days it should have eye tracking so that it actually keeps your eye in focus, nice and crispy and sharp. And you also want it to have fast autofocus so it doesn't hunt. If you ever watched a YouTube video and the person's in focus, but then it like gets fuzzy and then it gets fuzzy, or it goes to the background and then back to their face and to the background and then back to their face, the focus is hunting in that case. It's not staying locked on. You want it to be dependable. And so there's what's called phase detection autofocus and contrast-based autofocus. So for the last few years, Sony and Canon have been killing it with the best autofocus when it comes to cameras. And typically Panasonic and Nikon and other brands are missing it. Now, some new Fuji cameras that are pretty cool, like the Fuji X-T2 does have phase. The Olympus flagship camera does, and a lot of them have hybrid focus. But your best bet is really Sony and Canon when it comes to the best cameras for YouTube. However, it's a new world and things continue to change. In our top 4 cameras we recommend right now at Think Media, the Nikon Z30 does have what's called hybrid AF. That's phase detection and contrast detection. It checks all of our boxes. It's fast, eye detection, it's dependable. And so again, we'll get to the top recommended cameras, but this is a very intelligent question you should be asking, saying, how's the autofocus? What's the sensor size? Can I change lenses? What's the starting aperture, right? We're layering on these questions. Next, number 5 is audio. Does it have a mic input? Does it have a headphone output? Does it have a good on-camera microphone? And so a lot of cameras, you'll get home. A lot of people say, hey, Sean, is the Canon T6 a good camera? Well, if you don't have the T6i, T7i, Canon has attended that camera more for photo than video. And one of the features it's missing is a mic input. Now, if that's the camera you have, there's fixes for this. I'm going to show you a fix in just a second. But for YouTube content creators, a mic input is pretty essential. A headphone output is much more rare and a great benefit if you can have it. There's more cameras that have it today. You're a lot of times not going to use it unless you're behind the camera more as kind of a filmmaker situation, where you're filming others and you want to monitor the audio the whole time. In that case, you would say, I want to make sure I have headphones. But mic input would be one of those essential things. Or if it doesn't have those things, your question is, does it have a good on-camera microphone, right? And so, for example, the Sony ZV-1 has a really good directional mic that has clear sound on camera. Now, additionally, it actually has a mic input as well. And it also has this multi-shoe interface, so you can plug basically a cordless Sony brand microphone onto it as well. So it's a very versatile camera. It has a detachable windscreen as well. So if you want to keep it lean and mean and vlog just holding the camera, then you're good. But if you also want to upgrade and add microphones to it, then you're also good as well. But listen, there's a solution to every problem. If you say, Sean, I'm frustrated, I don't have a mic input, I'm stuck with this camera, what am I going to do audio wise? Well, here's a couple options. A while back, I filmed a video with a little action camera from Yi, and it didn't have a mic input. So what I did was I bought a $15 lav mic from Amazon, plugged it into my iPhone, and turned on my audio recorder. So then the video, which Omar from Think Media was actually helping me film on a little gimbal, so it was stable. That was 1, 2, 3, 4 feet away from me filming. And then I just had my lav mic clicked up to my phone. I hit record, put it in my pocket, and I was able to record the audio separately. Now, you might be thinking, well, that poses a problem. Now I've got the audio file separate from the video file. So that's going to mean it's more work. That's going to mean that in video editing, you're going to have to stitch those two things together. And modern video editing software has made that pretty easy. But all of these things can add complexity to your content creation workflow. And so as we are approaching our list of best cameras for YouTube, a mic input is essential because you want speed. Really, in a 2023 world, it is about creating content fast, trying to remove as much friction as possible, removing as much stress as possible, and not having too much extra time in editing. So there's a solution to every problem, though. And this is like another example you could use. This Zoom F2 is a wire or is a body pack that records audio directly to it. And so if you do want a solution, this is $150, which is important to consider. There's certainly cheaper ones, but it's important to consider because you're like, well, I'm going to save money on a camera, but now how am I going to do audio? And do I need to purchase extra items to do audio properly? But this would be another way to solve the problem if your camera does not have a mic input. Number 6, size, weight, and build quality. Okay, so the camera has all the features I want, but is it too big? Is it too heavy? Is it going to do what I want, where I want? Can it handle crazy weather conditions? Chase Jarvis says this, the best camera is the one that's with you, right? And so what can happen to a lot of creators is they buy a camera and they get all pumped to create content like this guy right here. This is a Canon EOS R with a converter so I could put an EF lens on it. This thing's pretty bulky. There's a lot of excuses I could make to not leave the house with this and just leave the house with my smartphone or with a G7X so that I could head out, shoot some vlogs, shoot some photos, zoom in, get some video clips and B-roll. So remember, the best camera is the one you have with you. What do you want to carry around? And do you even need to carry it around? I mean, if you're going to be locked down doing live streams or content creation at your desk, no big deal, but really important to consider the size, weight, and the build quality. So what are you going to use it for? Do you have the budget for multiple cameras? Like a lot of times a GoPro or a DJI Osmo or any kind of action camera, incredibly easy to take with you, but doesn't do everything. It's not your main primary camera. You can't necessarily get that zoom shot in, low light, it's not going to look as good. So are you going to have different cameras for different solutions? And if you're only going to have one camera, then maybe you want to be very selective on which camera you choose. Always remembering as well that your smartphone could be a second angle, could be for extra clips and other things you may need. Now, mirrorless cameras can actually be the best of both worlds. So it is possible, I think, to find, if you will, the perfect YouTube camera that's a good size and can also have good quality. And another thing to consider is, do you need it to be weatherproof or not? 99% of us probably don't, because if you're filming YouTube videos in your house, or you're a business owner filming YouTube videos where you're just sitting down and you're in a non-stormy, hardcore snowing situation, a lot of the cameras are plastic, maybe not even super well built. Like they're not going to take a beating, but you don't plan to beat them. On the flip side, the GH5 I actually am on right now for this very video is super weatherproof. It's a super durable, rock solid, built for rugged use. So that may be a feature you want to consider. Number 7, selfie screen and touch screen. So this camera, this is ideal for YouTube content and vlogging, and a touch screen makes things fast and easy. And let me know, of course, in the comments, do you think a selfie screen is a top priority for you? This is another one of those features that I would say is essential for YouTube creators. A lot of us are shooting by ourselves. We're filming by ourselves. We want to make sure that the shot composition looks good. We want to make sure that we're in focus, that we can get a good framing of the shot. And so there are amazing cameras that don't have selfie screens, but and if you're behind them, filming behind them, and you're a filmmaker, cinematographer, well, then that's the use case. But if you're creating YouTube content, I would say then for sure you want that that selfie screen, and potentially even a touch screen that makes it fast and easy to tap the screen for autofocus. The camera, Canon cameras, which interesting is Canon's probably the best at this. Great selfie screens that pop off to the side, the ability to tap the screen right on your face so that it tracks your face. And what's interesting is if you even look at a lot of the Sony cameras, they've got the selfie screen, but they're not even touchscreen. And as cameras progress, these little nuances and details are just some of the differences that can happen between cameras. And so selfie screen would be another one to consider as we go into number 8, which is the record time limit. Let me know if this one's ever surprised you. And if you've ever seen this dreadful screen that is pictured here, movie recording has been stopped automatically. This one will surprise a lot of people. They get a camera home, they sit down maybe. This also, if you don't have a selfie screen or some of these newer cameras that actually put like a nice red line around the selfie screen, letting you know it's filming. Red light on the front of the camera, letting you know it's filming. Because what can happen is you'll sit down with like your girlfriend, your spouse, somebody, you're like to record a 45-minute conversation, and then you get behind the camera and you go, oh, shoot. Oh no. It stopped record. Why did it stop recording? Well, historically, over the last really 10 years, cameras have been limited to right under 30 minutes. They have a record limit. And that actually was a way of avoiding a 5 to 12% tax on cameras in Europe, because they were not a video camera if they stopped recording under 30 minutes. So if it was a camcorder or if it was a cinema camera, well, it was a video camera, so they had to embrace that tax. But for all of these amazing kind of DSLR mirrorless cameras that shoot incredible pictures and incredible video, they had this 30-minute record limit. And so it's a good question to ask about a camera you're thinking about buying is, does my DSLR mirrorless camera have a 30-minute record limit? Now, fast forward to today, and this problem has been fixed for a lot of the newer cameras. But a question is, do you even need to record clips longer than 30 minutes? In my opinion, I want the camera to have as many future-proofed features as possible in case someday I do want to film a video podcast. But today, maybe you're just shooting little clips and vlogging. So if it's just 1 minute, 5 minute, 10-minute clips stitched together in editing, you don't need 30-minute clips. So you're good to go. It's like, you're not doing a video podcast. You're not doing long video clip. You're not filming a seminar where someone speaks for 55 minutes all straight through. So what do you actually need the camera to do? And what you'll see now is a lot of the good Sony cameras, the newer Canon ones, the R10 that just came out, the recording limit has been removed. Some of them actually can be powered from USB-C. So now you're able to plug these cameras into the wall continuously. But for most of them, what you can get is what's called a dummy battery, as pictured on screen. And then that just plugs into the battery port. And this is how you're able to use a camera that can be nice and crispy like this. I've got the battery door open. I've got a dummy battery in this camera, an HDMI cable plugged in this very camera I'm filming on, and I can run this thing all day long. No problem, not just with record limit, but also with live streaming, which we'll touch on later. Now, it might pop in your mind, Sean, why do people even use these photo-based cameras for video and for YouTube? It's a good question. Why are people not using camcorders and instead using point-and-shoot cameras? And so the answer is, to sum it up as simply as possible, is because typically the image on camcorders is terrible. So that's usually why. And that the image you can get out of these interchangeable lens cameras is absolutely incredible. And a lot of times camcorders have all kinds of weaknesses. However, if you want a very affordable, like under $300 camera with a mic input and a headphone jack and a flip screen and a good battery life, camcorders are often less talked about in YouTube culture. And I think it's because you're not going to get the Peter McKinnon, Casey Neistat look. You are not going to get, that a great camera that's also good for photos and thumbnails and content creation from that creative angle. But I'm not even trying to put camcorders down. Like, they are a great tool. And I actually have a video that will be linked in the description that goes deeper into the differences of both, if that's something you want to consider, which brings us to number 9, which is Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and NFC. Does the camera have Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, or NFC? And is that something I need? The main reason you would want this is a couple things. One, you would want this because you plan on controlling your camera with the app, the phone app. Does my camera have a phone app? And does it have Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, or NFC? Somebody yesterday on a stream we did said, hey, I need to get a remote for my camera. And one of the things people actually forget about is you may already have a remote for your camera. You already have a smartphone and your camera already has Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, or NFC, near field connection. So this can be something that can be very useful. And there's a few reasons why. One is you can transfer content from your camera to your phone for social media out in the field, like really quick and easy. So you take super crispy video clips or photos, and then you could just get that to your phone. Secondly, though, you can use your phone as a remote control for your camera. This you may be missing out on this. This could be the best moment of your YouTube career, right? You're like, this is amazing. I could put my camera on a tripod, sit 8 feet away from it, and control it from my phone. And I don't even have to do anything. It's free. Like I could just go download the app, make sure I connect everything. And so something to definitely look into. And here's a power tip. If your camera doesn't have a selfie screen, you can actually use the app on your phone as the selfie screen, because a lot of these Bluetooth and Wi-Fi connections where it's kind of like your phone creates a little Wi-Fi network that your camera creates the little Wi-Fi network that your phone connects to. You open up the Canon Connect app, and now you can see yourself in real time. And you're like, sweet, now you can frame up your shot, even adjust aperture and adjust the lighting, hit record. And so you may not want this feature, but this is a great feature. And most modern cameras, dare I say all of the newer cameras in the last 1-2 years for sure, would have these features. Now, number 10 would be skill level. As we think about all these features, one of the questions you got to ask yourself is, do I even want all this complexity? Let me know if you're feeling stressed already. If you're like, Sean, this is a lot of different things. This is a little more details than the guy I talked to at Best Buy in the camera section. Like you're really dropping some. Yeah. And so one thing to consider is simplicity can be power. And I've learned that actually complexity is the enemy of execution. When you're creating content on YouTube, you want a camera that's going to be fast, easy to use, that doesn't make you intimidated, so you don't hesitate to even create content because you're so overwhelmed by the complexity of your camera. So in some cases, getting a camera that's simple and good enough is the best way to go. What's kind of cool about Canon is they have this beginner friendly mode where, as you can see on screen, you can make the menus more advanced, but you can put the menus in this beginner friendly mode where you're like, I want background blurred. I want background sharp. And you just like slide, it's touch screen. It's just nice and user friendly. You're like, oh, this is so nice. Like blurry, sharp. All right. And you like press button. And so you're off to the races. And so what is the skill level of the camera? Number 11, image stabilization. This is a big one. Lean in for this one. Image stabilization. So if you look at some lenses, you can see it says on this Canon lens, stabilizer on and off. Right above it, it says AF, MF, that's autofocus and manual focus, clicking it on and off of the lens, okay? So why is this a big deal? Well, there's really 3 types of image stabilization. There's optical lens image stabilization. That means that inside of the lens, on a Tamron lens, it's called VC, vibration compensation, I think is what it stands for. It's the same thing. They do it different ways, maybe. There's a motor inside of this lens that takes out shake. So there's actually a little tiny motor inside of the lens optically stabilizing the shot, taking out shake. And the reason image stabilization is so powerful is, I don't know if you've ever turned on a YouTube video and you're like, I cannot wait for this content. I'm looking for something very specific, but the person filming is about to make you, throw up. You feel like you're getting sick watching it. Or it's not even just how shaky it is. There can be vibration where it's almost like, why is it vibrating? Because the sensor is kind of like jello. This is all because of a lack of stabilization. So the first is optical. That would be in the lens. The second is electronic. This can get kind of weird because this is actually like a digital correcting of the image. And then finally, there's what's called IBIS, which stands for in-body image stabilization. So now IBIS is where not the lens, okay, but actually inside of the camera, there's motors around the sensor itself that, you go right, it goes left to keep the shot smooth. So it's like these motors reacting in real time. And if you've ever seen a gimbal before, a gimbal stabilizer, it's kind of the same idea. It's like a motor. And so both optical lens IS and IBIS are the best. Those are actually taking out shake mechanically, essentially, and then electronic is taking it out digitally. So if you look at something like the DJI Osmo action camera or the GoPro, it's called hyper smooth. That's what they call their image stabilization. It actually is really good for like action sports. And what GoPro will do will keep the horizon level, and it'll be like, wow, like I don't even have a gimbal and I'm snowboarding. I did this, 2 years ago in Park City, and the shots were just amazing with like a GoPro 10 that's called hyper smooth. But there's also, of course, weaknesses to some of these smaller cameras. If you look at some of these point and shoot cameras, you've got you have potentially the combination of both optical and electronic. And so if you look on the front of this Canon G7X, it says Canon zoom lens. It can zoom in 4.2 times. That's the amount of optical zoom. And then it says IS. That lets you know there's image stabilization on the front on this camera, at least as it's written on the front of the camera. Now on Sony, and this is a big key, as you're researching this, it may be called different names. I mentioned Tamron has a different name on their lenses. Sony calls it steady shot. And you could see that this Sony has steady shot optical image stabilization. And then when we talked about IBIS, this gives you a picture of how it can work. It can affect if you tilt your camera, if you roll the camera, if you pitch it up, down, side to side, and what essentially the in-body image stabilization is correcting that shake, giving you a nice smooth shot. So here are a couple different cameras that have IBIS, the Canon, the Sony A6600, the Canon R5 and R6, the Panasonic G5. And what's really cool, and here's a power tip, is that some cameras can utilize both lens image stabilization and IBIS. They work together. So in the past, where people essentially would maybe really need a tripod or a monopod or a gimbal or a glide cam from kind of back in the day, sometimes some of these newer cameras with in-body image stabilization plus a good stabilized lens and some decent skills handheld, you can get just run and gun shots that are incredible and stable. And so remember, you might be like, this sounds amazing. I need to make sure my camera has IBIS. Well, not if it's forever at your desk, just sitting behind your computer like this camera. Not if you just film in your home office or your loft at your house and it's always on a tripod. You only really need these things, yes, if you're going to be vlogging or maybe behind the camera making short films. And so considering what exactly are the features that I need. This is a older Canon SL2 camera. It does not have IBIS. It did have image stabilization on the lens I was using here, but what I'm using is a gimbal stabilizer. So if you ever see one of these, remember there's solutions to every problem. So if you want to stabilize your footage, this you can also get a gimbal for your camera, but now it's bulky, right? Now it's heavier, it's bulky, it's intrusive, it's distracting. If you try to sneak that into a concert venue, that's probably not going to work. They might not allow you to take a gimbal stabilizer into Disneyland, but you may be able to film with a small point and shoot camera. So what is it that you actually need? And thinking about size and weight and all of those things. Number 12, frame rate and slow motion. For most of the cameras that you're going to be purchasing for YouTube, you're probably going to be good with what's called 1080p, 30 frames a second. So 1080, 1920 by 1080, as you can see on screen, 30p, which is 30 frames a second. And if you're in Europe, the European standard's like 25 frames a second. I think kind of old school because now we're all uploading on YouTube and something to consider. And this is definitely a place we could go geeky, but we don't need to. Now, what a lot of filmmakers want, some vloggers want, is they're like, oh, I want slow motion though. So we're looking actually at the new Nikon Z30, and you can film 1920 by 1080 at 120p. So if we add up the math, 30, 60, 90, 120, that's 4 times the amount of frames being captured in a second. And that what that means is when you watch a cool vlogger and they go, it's like, and there's like the puddle sprays slow motion, and it goes from fast, it's called speed ramping. It goes from, fast to slow, and all of a sudden the camera spins and someone's pouring coffee and it's, slow motion and all this kind of stuff. A lot of times that's because they're filming in 60 frames a second or 120, and they're able to then slow it down up to 4x without making it look like jumpy, right? So you can always slow down your footage 4 times, but it would be like there's not enough data there. So it'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, as opposed to smooth slow motion. So you got to just say, do I want to film slow motion or not? And then what'll happen is, you notice on this camera, this Nikon Z30, is you jump up to 4K, 3840 by 2160. There's your 4K 30 frames a second on the Nikon. You don't get those higher frame rates. So what'll happen on a lot of cameras is the highest resolution 4K just has like a basic frame rate. And then if you go higher, if you go 120 frames, a lot of these Sony cameras, they'll do like a burst. It's called a burst video. That'll give you 960 frames a second, but for 3 seconds. But if you wanted to film somebody doing a backflip, they just go bam, it only takes them 3 seconds, and now you've got it. And the resolution might be a little bit smaller. So is that something that you need? Here in the US, and kind of maybe remember in Europe, 25 and 50 is standard in Europe, but here in the US, 24 frames is what people usually film if they want that film look. 30 is kind of just standard. 60 frames is what a lot of gamers want for that. A lot of times their game is streaming in 60 frames, so they want their webcam or their video that they're capturing with to also be in 60 frames, so it matches, so it's smooth. And then 120 frames or above is for that super slow motion. And so let me know, is slow motion even a priority for you, or you just want to set it and forget it? And remember, you actually can always kind of go backwards, but it's hard to go forwards. So it's actually not hard to pull 30 frames a second footage into a 24 frame project, or 60 into a 24 frame project. I'm getting a little geeky here, but we shoot at Think Media all in 30 frames. And if we wanted to make kind of a more cinematic 24 frames, maybe recap or something, what we can do is just film the A-roll all in 24 frames. And then we could pull all the footage from our hard drives and just slow it down a little bit, which actually gives it kind of a vibe. So that's a little ninja and geeky, but forget about it. What frame rates matter to you? And does slow motion matter to you? And one power tip on this one for aspiring filmmakers is also, for people who care about slow motion, they also a lot of times care about log format recording, which simply means recording where the colors are very flat, essentially. Log profile stands for logarithmic profile. And some cameras have it so you actually have a wider dynamic range and a tonal range for color grading. This is usually going to slow down your video editing. But if you ever watch some people's videos and you're like, man, like the blues and the oranges in there, it's a whole mood. There's a whole color to it. Visco cam. Look at that cool Instagrammer chick's video. Wow, like she's got some color. What that fall tone, those tones on her video. That could be because of log format recording. I personally avoid this because it's like, get the content out. Let's like, even if the camera has it, a lot of times for speed, we will not shoot in log just because it adds more steps to the workflow. But if you would say, Sean, I want to be more cinematic, I really want to be a cinematic vlogger, I'm an aspiring filmmaker, then log might be important to you. And for example, this A6300, this is a little bit older, comes with S-Log2 and S-Log3, and you can get this camera for like under $500. So there is ways to get like these budget filmmaking type cameras. But log format, I would argue is not something that YouTube creators need, 99% of them, unless you know exactly what I'm talking about and you go, no, it's a huge priority for me. Well, awesome. Then you know why you want that. And I just want to make sure that as you're watching this video, you have all these different distinctions for what you may want to purchase in a camera. So let me know in the comments, are you planning on buying a camera? We have number 13, and then we've got my list of cameras here in just a second. But are you planning on buying a camera soon, and which model? Considering all these things, and has this information changed maybe what camera you're looking at? But number 13 is, does my camera have a clean HDMI for live streaming? Does it have a clean HDMI for live streaming? So picture on screen is a DSLR camera. On the side of the camera is an HDMI port. It is then, there's a cable from there plugged into a cam link, which is how you easily can turn a USB port into a camera input. So this camera I'm filming on has an HDMI port. This HDMI cable goes over to my PC, and I actually have a cam link in my PC, and the HDMI goes into that. The cam link has a USB input, and that gets plugged into output, and that gets plugged into the camera's input. And I'm on video. Look, mom, like here we are. So this is using a cam link, and this camera GH5 has what's called a clean HDMI output. Now, what does that mean? If it's not clean, it would mean you'd see like the time code, you would see the battery, amount, and you don't see any of that stuff on screen. So you may get a camera and you're like, I like all the features and I'm ready to start live streaming. And then you plug it in and you're like, shoot, I can't get the feed clean. I can't actually remove the stuff that's on screen. So this could be a challenge and something you should consider. So the question is, does the camera have a clean HDMI output? This camera is the ZV-1. At my Seattle office, I've got this camera as part of a couple different Sony cameras. I've got a 3-angle setup. So plugged in there is a power cable, and I actually don't use a dummy battery. I just use a USB cable plugged into a power strip that has PD, power delivery. That keeps the camera on. And then I've got the HDMI output. Now, one thing here for cameras is, what size is the HDMI output? Anything's fixable because you can get converters, but there's like micro, mini, and full size, I believe, are your options. So, you plug that in, and then I run this over to a capture card in this case. And so that's the power, and that is the video feed. This is another camera in that setup. There's the dummy battery, and then on the other side of the camera is the HDMI cable. Now, here's one cool thing to consider, though, is a lot of these newer cameras have software. I know for sure Canon has the EOS webcam utility. Sony has a similar software-based utility where all you have to do is use a USB port. Skip the cam link. You go USB from the camera and USB into your laptop or computer, and then you use their software, and boom, you can create a feed and start using your camera for video and live streaming. More importantly, in this case, this is a Canon M50, which, we're getting kind of geeky here, but the first Canon M50 did not have a clean HDMI output. However, you can use the webcam utility, and that would be just a nice clean, no battery, no brackets, nothing that's distracting in the shot. So there was a way to get around that. For some, using the HDMI output is going to be a higher quality. It's not going to be compressed using software. Therefore, just thinking about that. And then what happened was the Canon M50 Mark II, that was one of the very few changes they made to that camera, was they gave it a clean HDMI output. So that's another question for you. All right. So what are the 4 best cameras for YouTube, considering all of the 13 things we just talked about? If you've been getting value, smash like. And this is what I would say. I would say, in going up in price, number 1 is the Sony ZV-1. You've got the screen to see selfie. You've got a microphone jack. It's great for live streaming. It's great for vlogging. It is a little tight, but there's actually a couple different wide angle lens options, including a new one from Neewer that does not need to be actually glued on to your camera. So going into 2023, This is one of my top recommended cameras. We love it at Think Media for all around shooting videos professionally, vlogging, live streaming. It really checks all of the boxes. Now, it is just a 1-inch sensor, but it's absolutely amazing camera. I can't recommend it enough. If we go into mirrorless cameras and lenses, the Sony ZV-1, it's been making major waves. It really, for $798, including the lens, you get the flip screen, you get the jacks, you get it all. And it's a really good, and it's then, these are APS-C sensor cameras, crop sensor cameras. So the sensor is bigger than the ZV-1, great in low light, lens options, you're really good to go there. And then one of the newer cameras is the Canon R10. I think that Canon finally caught up with all the other cameras. The Canon R10 is essentially the new M50. The new M50 is a great camera. You could get a lot of them. We're going to talk about it in a second, ways to save money, ways to buy cameras used and get discounted older models. I'd still recommend it, but I would definitely say it is lacking a lot of these modern features, in particular, 4K that's not cropped. In particular, it has a record limit. The R10 solves all of those problems, coming in at $899, very competitive. This right here, my friend, is really the top 4 best all-around cameras for YouTube in 2023 at the time of recording this video. And if you want to go deeper on this, there is a in-depth comparison that Omar did between the R10, the Z30, and the ZV-1, and we'll make sure that video is linked up in the description. But you may be saying, okay, but what about full frame cameras? And I don't think you need full frame for YouTube. The ZV-1, just for comparison, is a 1-inch sensor. The 3 we just recommended are the orange on screen. That's an APS-C sensor. So that's where I'd recommend you go. But if you want to jump into that full frame sensor world, and who would this be for? You just are bougie and you just want the best look possible. You're bougie and you don't even care how it looks. You just want to spend more money. You do plan on shooting cinema videos and you want that just very cinematic, incredible looking shot. And people would argue that there's a big debates between APS-C and full frame anyways. But if you want to go to full frame, and it's definitely a good place to go, it's just going to cost you more. These are the 4 cameras we actually would recommend and that we personally use heavily. The Sony A7C is the most optimized full frame camera for YouTube at $1598. Now, these are just for the body. And if you're at this level, you're going to probably just invest in the body because this is the tip of the iceberg. You're going to be buying full frame lenses. They're a lot more expensive. So your body's going to be $1,500 to $3,000. You buy a couple lenses, you're at 10 grand easy. So not necessary for 99% of YouTube creators. But if you want to go to that really crispy higher level, the Sony A7 IV, that's like Nolan's favorite camera, along with the A7S III, really good for low light and cinematography. And then for more pro type cinema camera, really pumping out the content, building out a studio, Sony Alpha FX3 we have used extensively at Think Media. But you look at the prices. So I'm not saying these are necessary. I'm saying that if you really want to go to that next level of being a professional, and I don't even want to say that these are not professional cameras. Like, you could build a YouTube empire, scale your business, scale your content empire. This is really all you need. But if you would say, Sean, I want that full frame life, then these would be my top 4 recommendations for you. Now, you might want that budget life. Sean, I am trying to ball on a budget here. Like, what if I only have a few dollars could I do? Well, keep in mind, for $59, you could get a webcam from Logitech. If action cameras are something that you want to use, and you can use those for multiple things, vlogging, you can live stream from them as well, and different things. Their sensors are really small, and they typically do terrible in low light because the sensors are so small. For a point and shoot camera, and this is a used price, you can get a Canon G7X for $374. I just saw a completed listing. My friend Benji, the co-author of our book, YouTube Secrets, him and his wife still use G7Xs to post their vlogs, which get like 50 to 100 to 200,000 views per episode. So it's really not about the camera. It's about the content. And it's about a camera that's easy to use, that you take with you, that is good enough, right? And so G7X, I should say 2, G7X Mark II, you could get for around $375. The M50 for just the body, if you shop around, you could get for about $450. And then the Panasonic G7 doesn't have really good autofocus, but it's got some incredible features. You could do 4K uncropped. And so if you are willing to learn the features for under $500, that is a classic camera. So you could screenshot this. This is a great list of budget cameras that you may want to check out. But a huge mistake people make is not budgeting for accessories. If you get too fixated on the camera, then what can happen is you then go, oh, I didn't take time to think about what lighting am I going to purchase? What audio, what microphone am I going to purchase? Do I need a tripod? Have I got an SD card? What am I editing with? And so when selecting a camera, think about the big picture as well, and make sure you're subscribed to Think Media, where we talk about all of the above and can help you kind of navigate that world. But Ansel Adams, the famous photographer, said this: the single most important component of a camera is the 12 inches behind it. So I want to encourage you, it's not about your resources, it's about your resourcefulness. Whatever camera you can get your hands on, even if that's your smartphone, like, it's the 12 inches behind it. It's your creativity, your eye, your vision. But let's just talk about how to save money when it comes to purchasing a camera. 1, don't buy the newest models. 2, buy refurbished if you can. And then 3, don't overspend on features you don't need. If you're like, I got to get IBIS, Sean that sounds amazing. I got to get that in sensor. I got to get that in body image stabilization. Right. And so you may not need it. So don't overspend on features that you don't need. And if we look refurbished or used, this was a Canon M50 I found with the lens for $395, a completed listing on eBay. You could check. This is just give you an idea of prices right now. Here's an M50 on Amazon for $553. And notice in the black text towards the bottom right, the product is refurbished and is fully functional, backed by a 90-day Amazon renewed guarantee. The manufacturers will typically give you a 1-year warranty. If you look at the renewed or refurbished warranty, it may be 90 days or something like that. If you go to eBay, you might not get, of course, you're taking a risk. Here is a ZV-1 for $502. Open box, really good deal. Wish I would have got that deal, but you definitely could shop around over on eBay. And we love the ZV-1. That's like $130 less than the holiday pricing. But again, the question to consider would be, how important is having a warranty to you? And I know as I was building my video production business and on the rise, I'd buy lenses off Craigslist. I'd buy a lot of used gear, but I was also taking a big risk. It's just making, if it just stopped working or just only got a few more months of life, having the peace of mind of a warranty could be worth investing a little bit extra and just buying straight from Amazon or whatever. And as a reminder, we'll list out the cameras we talked about in the YouTube description here with our affiliate links. But also a money saving tip is that instead of buying a camera, you could use your phone or invest in video accessories. And so pictured on screen there is my phone with a tripod, a little MV88 plugged into the lightning port, a little ring light that clips on, and then you could live stream vertically off your phone or do whatever. So definitely check out Think Media videos on smartphone accessories. Even though we've covered all of these cameras now, it's also like, shoot, this stuff can be expensive. You could accessorize your smartphone as another way to get started, because there really is no excuses to not punch fear in the face, punch perfectionism in the face, and press record. But my question for you is, what do you think is the best camera for YouTube this year? And do you agree or disagree with my top picks when it comes to cameras? Let me know. And then click or tap the screen to watch another video from Think Media to help you on your content creation journey. Like this video if you got value. My name is Sean Cannell, rhymes with YouTube channel. And I want to thank you so much for being a part of this deep dive camera training.